first in the Philippine Navy and the armed forces. It's the conduct of anti-air defense exercise. We have the Cessna 208 as
The BRP Diego Silang has been commissioned to active service and is set to boost the Philippines' maritime domain awareness.
Today, the Philippine Navy stands at the center of what could become the largest naval expansion in the country's modern history. After commissioning its first two Miguel Malvar-class guided missile frigates in 2025, Manila is already moving ahead with plans to acquire two more under a repeat order program. Two additional frigates are also expected to be awarded under the next phase of the Armed Forces of the Philippines modernization program. But now, new reports suggest President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. has requested 6 more Miguel Malvar-class Flight 4 frigates, a move that, if approved, would bring the future fleet to 12 advanced guided missile frigates.
Through the AFP modernization program, especially through Horizon 3, we are investing in responsive and up-to-date assets and systems to ensure that our Navy remains a formidable force in the region.
On paper, those are just procurement numbers. In reality, they could mark the beginning of a very different Philippine Navy. If approved, this would be far more than another defense procurement. It would represent the most ambitious expansion of the Philippine Navy's surface combatant fleet in its history, and signal a major shift in how Manila intends to defend its maritime interests. And the timing is no coincidence. Over the past several years, the Philippines has faced increasingly frequent confrontations in the West Philippine Sea. Chinese Coast Guard vessels and maritime militia ships have challenged Philippine patrols, disrupted resupply missions, and expanded their presence inside waters that Manila considers part of its exclusive economic zone.
The Philippines urges China to respect the sovereignty and jurisdiction of the Philippines.
China has once again upped the ante in the South China West Philippine Sea.
For Philippine defense planners, those confrontations raised an unavoidable question. How do you protect one of the world's largest maritime domains with a navy built for a different era? Rear Admiral Roy Vincent Trinidad recently described the Miguel Malvar-class as the Philippine Navy's most modern warships, emphasizing that they are capable of patrolling all the way to the country's exclusive economic zone and even beyond.
We need a strong Navy, and we are now on the verge of being a strong Navy. Maasahan po ng ating mga kababayan ang inyong Philippine Navy, and for that matter, the entire AFP is prepared to secure and to protect our maritime domain, our territory, our sovereignty.
Equipped with a 16-cell vertical launch system, anti-ship missiles, advanced AESA radar, and anti-submarine torpedoes, they represent a significant leap in capability over previous generations of Philippine warships. But perhaps the most important story isn't how powerful these frigates are. It's why the Philippines suddenly believes it needs so many of them. Is Manila simply buying more warships? Or are we watching the beginning of one of the most significant transformations in Philippine naval history? For decades, the Philippine Navy wasn't built to confront a major naval power. Its primary mission focused on internal security, counterinsurgency, disaster response, and coastal patrols. Those missions were essential, but they reflected a time when Manila's greatest security challenges came from within its borders, not from growing competition at sea. That strategy worked, until the strategic environment began to change. The Philippines is an archipelagic nation with an exclusive economic zone covering more than 2.2 million square kilometers. Yet for years, much of that vast maritime area was patrolled by an aging fleet with limited endurance, outdated sensors, and few modern combat capabilities. Then the pressure began to build. Chinese Coast Guard and maritime militia vessels increased their presence in disputed waters. Tensions around Scarborough Shoal intensified. Confrontations near Second Thomas Shoal became more frequent, with Philippine resupply missions facing repeated obstruction. What were once occasional maritime disputes gradually became a persistent challenge to Manila's ability to maintain a presence in its own waters. For Philippine defense planners, the lesson became increasingly difficult to ignore. A country surrounded by the sea needed a navy that could stay at sea. That realization reshaped the armed forces of the Philippines modernization program. Under the revised modernization law, capability development was organized into 3 horizon phases, gradually shifting the military from an internal security force toward one focused on territorial and external defense. In 2024, President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. approved the Ray Horizon 3 initiative, a long-term modernization effort valued at up to US $35 billion, with renewed emphasis on maritime and air defense. But this transformation didn't begin with a plan to build 12 frigates. It began with a simple realization. Yesterday's Navy could no longer meet tomorrow's challenges. and that realization would eventually shape every major naval decision that followed. The modernization of the Philippine Navy didn't begin with the Miguel Malvar-class. It began with the Jose Rizal-class frigates. When BRP Jose Rizal and BRP Antonio Luna entered service in 2020 and 2021, they marked a historic turning point. For the first time in decades, the Philippine Navy operated modern guided missile frigates equipped with advanced sensors, anti-ship missiles, anti-submarine helicopters, and a combat management system capable of managing multiple threats at sea. But those ships also became a learning experience. As the Navy gained operational experience, it identified areas for improvement. The next generation of warships would need stronger air defense, more capable sensors, greater survivability, and additional room for future upgrades. Rather than starting from scratch, Philippine planners chose to build on what worked and improve what didn't. The result was the Miguel Malvar-class. Although similar in size, these 3,200-ton frigates represent a significant leap in capability. They feature the ELM-2258 Alpha AESA radar, a more advanced combat management system, hull-mounted sonar for anti-submarine warfare, and a 16-cell vertical launch system capable of firing VL Mica surface to air missiles. They also carry 8 Sea Star anti-ship missiles, Blue Shark lightweight torpedoes, and the Goktenes close-in weapon system for protection against incoming missile threats. Just as importantly, the design leaves room for growth. A larger hull and improved architecture provide greater flexibility for future weapons, sensors, and mission systems as operational requirements continue to evolve. In other words, the Miguel Malvar-class wasn't built to replace the Jose Rizal-class. It was built to improve upon it. That evolution helps explain why the Philippine Navy keeps returning to the same basic design. The next batch of frigates ordered from South Korea is also expected to be based on the Miguel Malvar platform, while discussions surrounding a possible Flight 4 variant suggest Manila is already planning beyond today's fleet. And that leads to an even bigger question. If the Miguel Malvar class has become the Philippine Navy's new benchmark, why stop at 4 or even 6? Why is Manila reportedly looking at a fleet of 12? At first, the Miguel Malvar class looked like a standard procurement program. In 2025, the Philippine Navy commissioned its first 2 ships, BRP Miguel Malvar and BRP Diego Salong. Together, they represented a significant leap in capability and became the most modern surface combatants ever operated by the Philippine Navy.
Diego Silang sends a clear message that the Philippines will continue to invest in programs that strengthen maritime domain awareness, enhance deterrence, and improve our ability to uphold the rule of law.
For most observers, that seemed like the end of the story. It wasn't. Only months later, the Department of National Defense moved to expand the program. A repeat order for 2 additional Miguel Malvar-class frigates was announced, reflecting growing confidence in both the design and its operational value. Rather than developing an entirely new class of warship, Manila chose to invest further in a platform it already trusted. Then, the program grew again. Defense procurement plans indicated that another 2 frigates were expected under the next phase of the Navy's modernization program, suggesting that the Miguel Malvar class was evolving from a single acquisition into the backbone of the future fleet. Then came the reports that changed the conversation. According to defense-focused reports and information circulating within Philippine naval circles, President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. has reportedly requested 6 additional Miguel Malvar Flight 4 frigates. While this proposal has not been confirmed through an official Department of National Defense contract or budget approval, it points to a far more ambitious long-term vision for the Philippine Navy. If that request eventually becomes reality, the numbers change dramatically. 2 ships already in service, 2 more on order, 2 expected under the next procurement phase, and 6 additional Flight 4 frigates. 12 Miguel Malvar class guided missile frigates. That is the moment this story stops being about procurement. Because 12 modern frigates wouldn't simply give the Philippines more warships. They would allow the Navy to maintain a more persistent presence across the West Philippine Sea, rotate ships through maintenance without leaving critical areas uncovered, strengthen anti-submarine and air defense capabilities, and support sustained operations alongside allies during joint patrols and regional exercises. In other words, if approved, this wouldn't simply expand the Philippine Navy. It would fundamentally change how it operates. But that leads to an even bigger question. Why does the Philippines believe it needs a fleet this large in the first place? At this point, one obvious question remains. Why 12? Why would the Philippines need a fleet that large? The answer begins with geography. Unlike continental countries, the Philippines isn't defending a single coastline. It is an archipelago of more than 7,600 islands, surrounded by multiple strategic waterways and responsible for protecting an exclusive economic zone covering more than 2 million square kilometers. That means the Navy isn't watching just one flashpoint. It must monitor the West Philippine Sea, where confrontations with Chinese vessels have become increasingly common. It must secure the Luzon Strait, one of the world's most important maritime choke points. It must patrol the Philippine Sea, safeguard the resource-rich waters around Benham Rise, and maintain a presence across the Sulu Sea and the country's southern maritime approaches. No single warship can cover all of that. And that's where the numbers begin to make sense. Because owning 12 frigates does not mean 12 frigates are at sea. At any given time, some ships are on patrol. Others are undergoing maintenance, training new crews, receiving software upgrades, replenishing supplies, or returning from months of continuous operations. In reality, a fleet of 12 modern frigates might leave only 4 to 6 available for sustained deployments at any given time. Yet those 4 to 6 ships could maintain a far more consistent presence across multiple maritime regions without overextending the fleet or exhausting their crews. That changes the way you look at the number 12. It isn't about building a larger navy for prestige. It's about ensuring the Philippine Navy can maintain a continuous presence in its own waters, respond more quickly to emerging incidents, and protect critical sea lanes without leaving other parts of the country exposed. Because in maritime strategy, presence is power, and in the increasingly contested waters of the Indo-Pacific, the ability to show up day after day, year after year, can be just as important as the weapons a warship carries. But even if the Philippines eventually operates 12 modern frigates, one critical question remains. Would that actually be enough to deter China's far larger navy? At first glance, the answer seems obvious. How could 12 frigates possibly deter the world's largest navy? The answer is yes, but not in the way many people think. Even if the Philippines eventually operates 12 Miguel Malvar-class frigates, it would still be vastly outnumbered by the People's Liberation Army Navy, the world's largest navy by the number of battle force ships. China also fields a much larger coast guard and a sizable maritime militia that regularly operate in disputed waters. But deterrence isn't about matching an opponent ship for ship. It's about making coercion more difficult, more costly, and more risky. A larger frigate fleet would allow the Philippine Navy to maintain a more consistent presence in the West Philippine Sea, respond more quickly to maritime incidents, escort civilian and Coast Guard vessels, and strengthen maritime domain awareness across its vast, exclusive economic zone. Just as importantly, these ships would not operate alone. They would work alongside BrahMos coastal missile batteries, maritime patrol aircraft, surveillance systems, and allied forces during joint patrols and exercises. Together, they create a layered defense that is far more effective than any single platform operating on its own. In naval strategy, this is known as distributed operations, spreading capable forces across a wide area to complicate an adversary's planning and increase the cost of aggressive actions. So the objective is not to defeat China's navy in a head-to-head confrontation. The objective is to make every act of coercion more difficult and every escalation more costly. Because sometimes, the strongest message a navy can send isn't that it is larger. It's that it is present, prepared, and backed by a wider network of capabilities. Modern naval warfare is no longer about individual warships. It's about how every platform works together. Even if the Philippines eventually operates 12 Miguel Malvar-class frigates, they would never fight alone. Every ship would become one part of a much larger combat network designed to detect, track, and respond to threats across one of the world's largest maritime domains. At sea, the Miguel Malvar and Jose Rizal class frigates would work alongside the Navy's growing fleet of offshore patrol vessels, extending patrol coverage across the West Philippine Sea and the country's exclusive economic zone. Above them, AW-159 Wildcat helicopters and maritime patrol aircraft would search for submarines, monitor surface activity, and provide real-time targeting information. Along the coastline, BrahMos supersonic missile batteries would add another layer of deterrence, holding hostile warships at risk from land while the fleet operates at sea.
Ryan, ano ang naging bunga ng paglahok ng BRP Miguel Malvar sa pinakamalaking maritime exercise sa mundo?
But the network doesn't stop there. Exercises such as RIMPAC 2026, where BRP Miguel Malvar deployed alongside an AW-159 Wildcat, demonstrate how the Philippine Navy is steadily improving interoperability with its allies. The United States contributes intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance support, while Japan, Australia, and South Korea continue expanding cooperation through training, technology, and maritime security initiatives. Future additions including submarines, expanded radar coverage, and unmanned systems would strengthen that network even further. Because in modern naval warfare, the real weapon isn't 12 frigates. It's everything connected to them. And that's exactly what the Philippine Navy is trying to build. But building an advanced combat network is only half the challenge. Keeping it operational for decades may prove even harder. But building 12 frigates is one thing. Keeping them operational is something else entirely. In many ways, buying the ships is the easy part. The real challenge is sustaining them over the next 30 years. Every new frigate requires trained crews, skilled technicians, spare parts, ammunition, and constant maintenance. Missiles must be replenished, combat systems updated, and sailors trained continuously to keep pace with evolving technologies and threats. Then comes the financial reality. Modern warships remain expensive long after they are delivered. Fuel, repairs, software upgrades, logistics, and lifecycle maintenance can cost billions over decades, meaning future governments must remain committed to funding the fleet, not just building it. There are operational challenges as well. The Philippine Navy will need sufficient dockyard capacity, maintenance facilities, and technical expertise to keep multiple frigates available without creating bottlenecks that reduce operational readiness. And the ships themselves are only part of the equation. A frigate is only as effective as the weapons it carries. Maintaining adequate stocks of surface-to-air missiles, anti-ship missiles, and anti-submarine torpedoes will be just as important as expanding the fleet itself. If Manila can overcome these challenges, a 12-frigate fleet could become the backbone of a much stronger Philippine Navy. If not, even the most advanced warships may struggle to deliver their full potential. And that raises one final question. What could the Philippine Navy actually look like a decade from now if this modernization continues? Imagine the Philippine Navy a decade from now. If today's modernization plans continue, Manila could operate a fleet centered around 12 Miguel Malvar-class frigates, supported by the Jose Rizal class, a new generation of offshore patrol vessels, BrahMos coastal missile batteries, AW-159 anti-submarine helicopters, and an increasingly integrated network of maritime surveillance systems. And that may only be the foundation. Future additions including submarines, unmanned systems, and stronger air and missile defense could further expand the Navy's ability to protect the country's maritime interests and operate alongside regional allies. The objective isn't to build the biggest navy in Asia. It's to build a fleet that is modern, sustainable, and capable of protecting one of the world's largest exclusive economic zones. If that vision becomes reality, the Philippine Navy would look very different from the force it was just 2 decades ago, evolving from a coastal defense force into a maritime force capable of maintaining a persistent presence across the Indo-Pacific. Would that make it one of Southeast Asia's most balanced medium-sized navies? That remains open to debate. But one thing is becoming increasingly clear. The reported plan for 12 frigates is about far more than adding new ships. It reflects a long-term strategy to reshape how the Philippines protects its seas. And if this is only the beginning, the Philippine Navy of 2035 could look very different from the one we know today. When people hear 12 frigates, they think of 12 warships. But that's only part of the story. The real story is that the Philippines is reshaping its maritime strategy. From defending the coastline, the Philippine Navy is evolving into a force designed to protect an exclusive economic zone of more than 2.2 million square kilometers, maintain a continuous presence in contested waters, and strengthen deterrence alongside its allies. Whether the reported plan for 6 additional Flight 4 frigates is ultimately approved or not, one thing is becoming increasingly clear. Manila is no longer planning only for today's challenges. It's preparing for tomorrow's. And perhaps that's the biggest takeaway from this story. The question is no longer whether the Philippine Navy is changing. It's how that transformation could reshape the future of the South China Sea and the wider Indo-Pacific. If the Philippines eventually fields 12 modern guided missile frigates, will that be enough to reshape the regional balance? Or will it simply mark the beginning of an even larger naval competition across the Indo-Pacific?